Origin Chance from CGRX, and this is why there's a CIA base in center of Australia by the channel RealLifeLore. Yeah, there's a CIA base in the center of Australia. Okay. I mean, look, when it comes to US military, obviously US military has lots of overseas bases, and then you see all these movies and shit, which implies that CIA has way too many, sites, black sites, and whatever bases, secret bases here and there. Obviously, you think like this must be somewhat exaggerated, but maybe not that much. So, CIA, there's a CIA base in the center of Australia. That wouldn't really surprise you. But you never, at least I never heard of this. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting video. RealLifeLore is a great channel, right? Recently, he's been uploading videos like of the current conflict series, which goes into really detail. Like I've never seen any other video goes into detail like that. So yeah, this is a 11-minute video, so it's going to be fun. Let's watch it.
Is a fascinating continent. As the driest continent in the world apart from Antarctica, it's no surprise that Australia is home to the second largest desert of the inhabited Earth's continents, remaining only behind the Sahara of northern Africa in scale and scope. The Great Australian Desert spans more than a third of the continent and is larger in size than the entirety of Kazakhstan. And it's partially because of this desert that Australia itself, despite being the 6th largest country in the world in terms of land, is only the 53rd largest in terms of people, with a modest population of less than 26 million citizens. We're around the same size as North Korea, but within this vast, inhospitable, and empty desert, at the precise geographic center of the Australian continent, exists a surprising and relatively unknown secret of enormous geopolitical importance. One of the largest overseas military bases of the United States of America, operated by the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Administration, and the National Reconnaissance Office with a full 800 combined personnel. The base is—
Alright, let me take a, take on this. I guess because it's in the center of the desert and because it's a national reconnaissance base, I don't know about a bit of astrophysics, and this could be because of that, because it's in the center of the desert. It's in Australia, right? Southern hemisphere. So basically, because there's not much noise there, light noise and any form of noise, radio noise, guard noise, different type of noises. So, all the light spectrum noises and, pollution and shit like that, since there is hardly any of that, it's great to, communicate to satellites and, check out anything in your orbit, anything space related, let's just say. And we know that, national defense basically relies on that shit, right? So I think that must be it, right? I don't know if it, NSA, National Reconnaissance, understand that, but CIA, why would CIA be there? But again, access to, satellites in a way, right? Some of the secret satellites too, right? That nobody can basically pick up if it's in front of this kind of a deserted area. That could be the reason, I don't know.
Located nearby to the small Australian town of Alice Springs. Population just 26,000 or so people. But besides for that, there is no larger town that exists anywhere nearby to this base, within a zone of about 700,000 square kilometers, roughly equivalent in area to the US state of Texas. So to say that this American intelligence base, with hundreds of American intelligence officers operating within the dead center of Australia, is a remote location would be an incredible understatement. From the small Australian town of Alice Springs, if you take a short drive just 10 minutes or so to the southwest, you'll quickly run into various threatening signs like this one warning you to turn your car around and proceed no further, or else face some vague consequences. Just beyond these signs is, of course, the top secret joint intelligence base of Pine Gap, run by both the American and Australian governments. And unless you've watched the Netflix series about this base going under the same name, you've probably never even heard of this place, or knew that such an important American operation existed in the middle of the Australian outback. And going under the more official codename of Project Rainfall, it has a very long and mysterious history here going back decades into the past. You see, as the global Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union intensified during the 1960s, both nations began sending up satellites into space. With the launching of the earliest intelligence-gathering satellites, there was a recognition that real-time command and control over these platforms were necessary, and data collection to monitor geopolitical adversaries from afar was required. An American base to operate these American intelligence and spy satellites operating over the planet's eastern hemisphere could have theoretically been constructed anywhere, but the precise geographic center of the Australian continent was chosen for a number of strategically important factors. First, the sheer isolation of such a base deep within the continental interior of Australia, more than 900 kilometers away from the nearest coastline, ensured that any potential spy ships from foreign nations passing around would be incapable of intercepting any of the signals coming down to the base from the satellites. Second, the base would be located deep within Australia, a country who is very friendly and allied towards the United States, and far away from any major Australian population centers around the coasts. And third, and perhaps most importantly, the location where the station would be built required the base of the floor and surrounding hills to not exceed 6 degrees, at the precise coordinates of Pine Gap's location in the center of Australia at latitude 23.8 degrees south and longitude 133.74 degrees east. The ability would be gained to allow for high connectivity with satellites stationed as far as 60 degrees east and as far east as 153 degrees west.
Yeah, so I kind of see that coming, right? Because biggest enemy of any, communication to space is the noise, any electromagnetic noise, right? So it could be radio waves, anything, microwaves, basically pollutions, obviously. So in this, when you see this Australia from this point of view, very few land can be seen in this portion. So major portion is Pacific Ocean, obviously lots of Indian Ocean. So it's just in the right place, Australia. That's why they say that that star Eta Carina, when it explodes, or maybe it already has, we'll be able to see clearly from Australia, from Sydney or whatever. Because even though there are cities like Sydney is a big city, overall the pollution is very low.
Effectively covering the entirety of China, North Korea, the Indian subcontinent, and a significant portion of the then Soviet Union. In short, it was a very logically chosen location to construct a satellite intelligence base at. And as a result, by late 1966, the American and Australian governments signed a treaty calling for the creation of a US satellite surveillance base in Australia, which eventually became the modern Pine Gap, where operations began in 1970 with the relocation of hundreds of American families to the center of the outback. But there was another, larger intelligence alliance at work here that led to the creation of the base as well, known.
Introducing Opera GX, the first.
What I'm really thinking is how hard it would be, like all these people living in the base, all the families, basically, entire families, obviously, right, living in the base. How hard would it be? That's just ridiculous, living there.
The Five Eyes. This is an intelligence alliance of the 5 major English-speaking democracies around the world of the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Created during the fires of the Second World War and expanded during the Cold War, this alliance structure enables all member states' intelligence agencies to easily cooperate with each other and share all of their worldwide data. As the Cold War continued to rage and new threats to the United States emerged, like the People's Republic of China, Vietnam, and later on, Iraq and Afghanistan, Pine Gap continued to play a pivotal role in providing intelligence while dramatically growing in size to the point where today it boasts nearly 40 separate antennas across the site and has operated at least 9 geosynchronous satellites owned by various US spy agencies over the past 45 years.
Damn,
now, what makes these kinds of satielites uniquely well suited.
Yeah, geosynchronous, so it's basically aligned with the ground, right? So it can communicate with each other and create this kind of an orb shield. I don't know how to say that. basically that can communicate basically any place on the planet, because it can communicate with each other, right? It can take a signal from here, communicate to this, and get images and data from here. Another one can take from here and whatever.
To the mission of intelligence gathering is that within a geosynchronous orbit, they travel in the same direction as the Earth's rotation, and therefore retain the exact same orbital period as that of the Earth's rotation, which effectively just means that they view the exact same portion of the Earth's surface at all times, as if they're sort of fixed in position on the map. This is in stark contrast to satellites that operate in lower Earth orbits, which circle around the planet often multiple times a day, and move at a relative pace much faster. One of the unique advantages of a geosynchronous orbit for a spy satellite is that within this range, it can see an enormous amount of the Earth's surface all at once. In fact, if you were to go and do all the math and run the calculations for this, it turns out to be just a tad bit less than half of the Earth's entire surface. This, of course, makes it incredibly easy for the spy satellite above to gather a vast amount of information from a very large area beneath it. And so today, there are 3 of these types of geosynchronous spy satellites known to be operated from Pine Gap, all at the same line of latitude. Orion 5 above the western Indian Ocean, Orion 7 at the western tip of the Indonesian island of Sumatra, and Orion 3 just west of the Indonesian island of Sulawesi. Each of these 3 geosynchronous satellites sit at an altitude of about 36,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface at these precise coordinates, and they each collect an incredibly wide range of electronic signals from the Earth's surface beneath them, like radio communications, radar emissions, microwave transmissions, missile telemetry, satellite and cell phone transmissions, and even more. These 3 satellites effectively grant American intelligence agencies, and therefore the intelligence of all the Five Eyes member states, an incredible degree of satellite coverage across every single area of modern US critical strategic concern. From Western Africa, across the Middle East, Ukraine, Russia, Iran, Afghanistan, China, and North Korea. More than half of the Earth's surface outside of the polar regions. Once data from these regions is received by the satellites, their information is relayed via a signal back to the Pine Gap base in the center of Australia, and then disseminated from there towards the various intelligence agencies of the Five Eyes member states, like the American CIA and British MI6. And while controversial at times, the American intelligence capabilities that are granted by satellite sites around the world like Pine Gap are unmatched by any other intelligence agency in the world. And while most of what these satellites do is...
You know what is surprising to me, that this information exists in the first place, right? Like, it's a public known information now, which is kind of this is a pretty important base, Pine Gap, right? Like you say, there's even fucking Netflix show on it. So if some kind of a major war comes in the future, world war or whatever, opposing power, first of all, would definitely try to take out something like Pine Gap, right? Base like that, because it's just, they know where the location is. They know it's way too important to, basically take all the information of Europe and Asia. So they would first try to take out that, right? Because World War III starts, it will start like, taking out satellites, taking out bases, communication centers, first like that, right? If you take out their, let's just say, eyes, I don't know how to say, basically whatever that collects information first, right? Then the war starts. So I have to think that there must be many bases like this that people would know about, because they have to, right? Knowing how, since the Cold War, how USA has been operating, there has to be bases that nobody knows about, right? Like, look at Area 51, nobody knows what the fuck is happening there. Even today, right? Every Area 51 has become really important, but nobody knows what actually happens there. So there must be many bases like that overseas as well, in deserts and shit, that nobody knows. Pine Gap, for whatever reason, became public, or maybe they wanted to be public. Like, okay, fine, we have other bases that does the same thing, so we don't care if Pine Gap becomes popular or something, whatever. But yeah,
is top secret and highly classified. We all know that launching those satellites, maintaining them up there, and gathering all that data from the surface below is an incredibly difficult feat to accomplish. And if you're anything like me, then you're probably curious how satellites like these actually work, and more to the point, how anything actually works.
Yeah, people go to brilliant.org/RealLifeLore and support this channel. As far as his comment about his incredible feat, of course it's incredible feat, but not for the US Air Force. People need to understand like how badass US Air Force is. But we know Hubble, right? Like there's Hubble. Holy shit, Hubble, the most successful equipment of science ever existed. You need to realize that US Air Force or Air Space Command, whatever it was called, the sub division of US Air Force, right? They sent the first Hubble type telescope in space, but to spy on Earth, basically, against Soviet Union or whatever, right? They are first at literally everything before even something like NASA can do something, right? So defense comes first. After the Apollo program, all the technology from that, all the defense programs like Air Force, basically anything space, they basically got funded like ridiculous that nobody did, and they made advances at a level that even NASA asked for, like give us the technology. We don't have that, right? We know that we need that technology, and that's how Hubble was launched. So it is an incredible feat but not for US Air Force. They can do this shit, right? They're sending out satellites, maintaining them. It's not a big thing for them. That's why when Trump said like we should have a space force and everybody laughed, there is already a space force, but it's under US Air Force. Trump just suggested we should make it a separate division, right? So it's not really like, oh, Trump said it, so it must be ridiculous. That's not the case, right? Sometimes it becomes so big, certain division becomes so big that they get detached and become their own thing. People have been talking about creating US Space Force for now 2 decades, right? So Trump is not the first one. But since Trump said it, people start to make fun of it. But yeah. Right, well, that was why there's a CIA base in the center of Australia by the channel RealLifeLore. If you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe. And yeah, I'll see you next time.